Hey guys, today I'm going to be showing you the process for how I made this milkshake model. Before we get started, I just want to say you can download this file for free, and I highly recommend you do that if you want to follow along because everything is mapped out pretty well in the file and it'll give you a good in-depth look to how everything was made. To begin with, I'm going to add a circle, and what we're going to do is we're going to make our milk object. So what I do is I just extrude up basically, scale out a bit so it becomes kind of like a glass shape, and pretty much I add some loop cuts with Control R, then I hit Alt S to basically scale them out a bit. I also hit Control 1 to add a subdivision surface modifier, and from there we kind of have like a glass looking shape. What I also did was I filled the top and bottom with the F key, and I did that after obviously alt clicking on the edge of the top circle and the bottom circle, and then I insetted with the I key to basically make it so that. So the next thing I want to do is I want to add the handle. So I'm adding a cube, extruding to the right, and then adding a loop cut, extruding down, then back again to the left. And we want to add a subdivision surface modifier with Control 1 to kind of give it like a smooth shape, I guess you could say. From there, you really just want to play around with it a lot and get it to be in the shape that you want it to be. As you can see here, I'm scaling things and making adjustments like that. Once you're done, you can apply the subdivision surface modifier with Control A and then move around the geometry individually from there. Alright guys, so now we're going to be doing the milk, and I'm going to be showing you the texturing process for that. So basically, to start off with, I'm going to show you how I did the middle milk and the bottom milk. So as you can see, there's these different colors here, and basically what I did was I added a gradient texture, as you can see here. If I shift control click on it, it's very subtle, but you may be able to slightly notice it. It's basically darker a little bit on the bottom. What I did was I ran that into a map range node, and I used the stepped linear feature here, which basically allows us to use the steps function. As you can see, if you look at the bottom of the milk, you can see it has these sort of steps that make it darker and darker as it goes down. Moving forward, I then used this gradient to make it into black and like a brownish color. And the reason I left this black down here is because we're going to be using it for something else, as you're about to see. So I have this base color here as well that I made, and what I wanted to do pretty much is just combine the two of these together. I used mix node here with the screen option, and what the screen option does is it basically just adds two things together. So what we're doing here is we're adding this with this, and obviously black is 0, so it's not going to add anything here. But yeah, I'm going to go a bit faster now in the gradients because I hope you guys can understand how the gradients work. By the way, watching this, you guys may be interested in a more detailed walkthrough that goes more step by step. And that's exactly what I do over on ukiyogirls.io. This is a full series of lessons where you'll become amazing at creating high quality Ukiyo-inspired models. From sculpting to high quality shader creation and texturing using the layered method, to rigging, I'll go over every step of the process in detail, regardless of your skill level. I'll show you how to make not only this 3D portrait from scratch here, but I'll also show you how to make this rigged character from scratch, including the spicy version of the body. And in addition to all of that, you'll get access to my koi pond and sunflower animation series, which will really further improve your skill in making beautiful Ukiyo-inspired models and animations from scratch. There's a few other goodies you'll get upon joining, so make sure to check out all information on ukiyogirls.io. Anyways, next up what I did was I wanted to add some dots to this part of it, because in these types of drinks there's like these type of dots that appear here, and I just wanted to make that. Using a Voronoi texture, you can have all these like dots really easily. But anyways, we combined that together. Now as you can see, what I did was I constricted the dots so that they're only in the top portion of the milk. It's hard to notice, but, well, I mean, it's not that hard to notice to be honest, but basically I added this little sort of intermediate between the top milk and the middle milk. Anyways, moving forward, I didn't include this in the final model, but basically I added an image texture here, which I could texture paint on, and then I drew in these red areas here. If you're wondering why I made this, it's because if we go here to the next image texture, I kind of wanted this redness to be like sort of like an underlay for the black chocolate that I drew. One other thing I should say is that you should remember to unwrap the milk. This is the only object in this model that we have to unwrap, but basically since we are drawing on it, we want to unwrap it, so just remember to do that as well. Mark your seams with Control E, mark seam, and then hit A, then U, then unwrap. And also these greater than nodes here, basically the purpose of it is just to sort of harshen the image texture that I drew. Basically you can see it's kind of soft, but then when we use greater than, it becomes hard. Next part is to add the whipped cream foam at the top. So this once again is pretty simple. If you've studied the other things that I did before this, really nothing crazy at all. We just have a gradient texture. After that, I added a diffuse light toon shading. If you've ever made a toon shader before, it's literally just this. Whenever I say toon shader, I'm just referring to this setup here, where we have a diffuse BSDF, a shader to RGB, and then a color ramp, which then allows us to have, it's basically like toon lighting. Obviously, if I grab our sun object and I move it around, as you can see, it reacts to it. And then finally, I just had one final gradient at the end to make it a bit brighter on the left side. Next up, we want to add the sort of chocolate syrup that kind of droops off the edges. So what I do is I just select a loop that goes around the milk object, hit Shift D, P by selection, and then basically I hit Alt S, and from there you're able to have your own object that we can then move downwards and then extrude down from certain parts of it. As you can see right here, I'm extruding down with the E key and then scaling so that it looks like it's kind of drooping down. Alright guys, so the next thing I want to talk about is basically this chocolate droop that I added on the side. Obviously all the shaders from now on are going to be a lot simpler than the one for the milk. Over here I had a base color and then I added a gradient to the top. As you can see, it basically is just this top gradient. And then I combine it with a reflection mask, which I use a glossy BSDF shader to RGB and a color ramp for. Pretty much it's just this white reflection. If I drag this up you can see it a bit. Next up I added another reflection, but this time it was going to be like the brown one. The next thing I added was just a final gradient going from left to right, but it's not really that noticeable. Anyway, so yeah, obviously you can also use proportional editing and basically adjust the edges of this drooping chocolate that we made to give it kind of like a wavy feel. I promise this is the last thing about the drooping chocolate, but one other thing I added at the end that I thought had a really cool effect was I added a displace modifier. In the rest of this video we'll go more into that, but basically if you play around with the strength here, as you can see it adds this sort of craziness, I guess you could say, to the chocolate, and I think that just helped it to look like even better and give the model a lot more character. Next, for the whipped cream, you can literally just add a sphere and also add an empty. What we're going to do is we're going to add a displace modifier to the sphere, create a new texture, and basically you want to switch the coordinates from local to object. Select the empty and set the image texture to be wood. I think that's what I selected there. But yeah, basically what that lets you do is basically if you rotate around the empty, you can make it have these sort of stripes, and by doing that as well as moving around the sphere and scaling in parts of the sphere, you can have it sort of taper at the top and look like whipped cream. For the shader for the whipped cream, it's actually extremely simple. Literally just tune shading here and then a gradient. I should also mention to you guys that if we go over to the modifiers tab, as you can see in the end the subdivision surface is gone because I applied it with Control A. As you can see now, if we hit tab to go into edit mode, it's really dense. The reason I applied the subdivision surface and the displace is so that, you know, we can then, using proportional editing, move things around and make it look a bit better like that. Okay, I just want to make a quick detour. Basically, a lot of the items in the scene have this black outline on them, and I'm going to show you how to make that. So if I add a new modifier, add a solidify modifier, set offset to 1, turn off fill, go to normals, turn on flip, in materials type in -100. What you can then do is if you go to the materials tab, hit new, and you should have two materials here. You should have one which is for this object, which we'll just use like this material.004 as the one that we're using for this object itself. You want to take this other one, drag it up with the arrow key here, and then we can go to the shader editor on this, hit new, delete this, and then just type in RGB to add an RGB node, and then pretty much from there you can set it to whatever outline color you want. So if I want it to be blue, it'll be blue. You have to turn on backface culling as well. And now if I go back to the properties tab, as you can see, we can add an outline like this. Next up, I wanted to add the chocolate syrup that goes on top of the whipped cream. So I just added a plane, I subdivided it and added a solidify modifier as well. And basically from there, what you can do is you can extrude edges from this plane that we made and scale in certain edges as well, you know. And you can basically just get this whole chocolate syrup shape by doing that and extruding it around, moving it, and doing all that. After that, I want to talk about these chocolate syrup things that I added on top of the whipped cream. There's really nothing to say here, to be honest. It's literally just reflection, base color, another reflection as you saw with the other chocolate, and that's it. So now to add the cookie, literally I just added a cylinder which I insetted in the center with the I key, and I deleted that inset, bridged the edge loops between the two holes that we cut, and then I hit Control 1 with the subdivision surface modifier. So that basically gives us like kind of like a donut shape, which we want to use here. And then I also added a displace modifier because this particular type of cookie I was making was pretty rough and rugged. After that, I also added a kind of like a little yellow crumb thing that is common on these types of cookies. So as you can see, I'm doing that here. The process is the same. You add a displace modifier, and pretty much you just want to duplicate all these crumbs that you made around and scale and rotate them and do all that. I literally just did all of this by hand. If you're wondering why I'm not using like particle systems or something like that, is because I feel like it doesn't give you enough control, so I prefer to just do it manually. And what you want to do is make sure that you click on your crumb and then shift click on the cookie, hit Control P and then parent to object, so that whenever you move a crumb, it'll just be parented automatically. So now if we duplicate any of these crumbs and then move the cookie around, it sticks on it. Next thing I'll talk about is the the cookie here. Once again, nothing to say, just basic toon shading and reflection. Same with these crumbs, just a basic toon shader. Next up, in order to make the straw, I just added a cylinder, scaled it in with S-Shift-Z, and then I positioned it basically in a place that I wanted. Obviously, in the end, I ended up making it more on the front side rather than the back side. So I used a wave texture for the stripe, as you can see there, and then I just made it into red and white, and then I combined it with a basic toon shader here. And oh yeah, also the handle. For the handle, I ended up changing it a lot. Before, it was pretty small and just unrealistic, so I ended up making it a lot bigger because I showed it to my friend, and he pointed that out. Hello, Thirth, if you're watching. But anyways, yeah, so it's clear now as well. I changed the material up so it's clear, and I also made it bigger. For the material, it's not that complicated. Pretty much just a glass BSDF that I mix with the mix shader with a transparent BSDF, so you can determine how transparent you want it to be. And then I add an outline to it using this layer weight node setup. Basically what it lets you do is it lets you have like a fake 2D outline, because with glass objects and transparent objects, it's hard to get the solidify outline to work properly. Also remember to have alpha blend enabled and enable screen space refraction so that the glass BSDF works. And then I also added the specular thing with the glossy BSDF trick here. And so yeah, that's basically how I made the glass. Nothing too crazy there. One other thing I want to tell you guys is that I actually duplicated the milk object and switched its material to a glass object. So if I go into the shader editor here, as you can see, the shader for the glass is really simple. All it is mainly, it's literally just this glass BSDF here that I added, but I also added this reflection trick again, which basically makes like a white, if I drag this out here, you could kind of see it. It's this kind of like white specular thing it has at the top, like right here. And so the way I made it was, obviously I just duplicated the milk, and then I hit Alt S in edit mode on the glass so that it would go out of it. And I actually did the same exact thing for this other object here called transparency, which is just like we did with the glass. I just duplicated it from the milk, and basically all it is it's just kind of like a outline object. The way it works is we have a transparent BSDF, and by the way, to ensure that the transparent BSDF works, you have to have alpha blend enabled. But yeah, it's just that, and then solidify here. And if I go to our modifiers tab, you can see we have the solidify outline here. And so basically what that does is it's just like this sort of transparent object that has an outline around it. But anyways, yeah, so that's about it. I hope you guys learned something, and once again, check out ukiyogirls.io if you guys want to actually become a master of this style. Ciao!